This is a video for the Talking Maths in Public animation generation collaboration, in which the prompt is to create an animation that shows the link between a sine curve and a unit circle. And the idea of these videos is to show how you've created the animation. So I've decided to do this in Manim. I am by no means a Manim expert, but I've done a little bit of Manim, so I've figured this out from looking at the documentation and messing around with things until it worked. My hope might be that a Manim expert might come along and tell me how to improve this, but this is something that will get an animation working. It does the job. So to start here on the screen, on the right I've got just a text file in Notepad, and this has got the basic start off of the function that I'm writing. And on the left is the Windows PowerShell, which is where I run the Manim code from. We start off in this code. This is all written in Python. Manim is a Python library. So we start off with from Manim import star, and that will bring in all the functions from Manim that we need to make the animation. We have a class, circle sine, and then the main function within that class will be this construct function, which always has a self, and that's where we do everything. So what I'm doing here to start with is creating a circle, so calling the circle command with a radius 1, and then I add that circle to self, and that will display the circle on the screen when I run the code. So to run the code, we use this command in Manim. So Manim, these parameters tell it, P tells it to preview the animation, so it will open up straight away, and then the QL does it a low quality, so just so it runs a bit quicker. Then have the file name and then the name of the function that you want to run. So if I run that, I get a little circle, as we'd expect. Absolutely lovely. And this is just a picture at this stage because I'm not animating it, just a picture of a circle. So the first thing I want to do is, this circle is in the center of the screen, and if I want to show the link with the sine curve, it's probably better to have the circle on the left and the sine curve on the right. That's the classic way to do it. So I can move the circle to the left by adding a dot shift left times 3. So left is a vector that's predefined in Manim, which is a amount of space moved to the left, and then 3, multiplying it by 3 will move it 3 times that far. So if we run that again, we get a circle that's moved slightly to the left. The next thing I want to do is show the center of that circle. That's probably a useful thing to do. So I can define center as a dot. A dot is like a small circle, I suppose. And again, I'll shift that left by 3, and then that should be in the center of the circle. And I haven't added that to the scene, so that won't actually be shown. So if we add that in now. And then that's added the center in. So then the next thing to add is some axes for our sine curve to go onto. So I'll put this in, I'll paste it in, and then I'll say what it is. So we call the axes command, we have the x range, so we have that from 0 to 2 pi in steps of pi by 4. The y range from -1 to 1 in steps of 1. The length of the x axis, we'll have that as 2 times pi. And the length of the y-axis will be 2. Tips equals false stops it from showing big arrows on the ends of the axis. There are lots of different ways to configure this. Manim's actually pretty well documented, so I'll put a link in the description to the documentation. And then we don't want the axes in the center of the screen, we want those over to the right, so I'll shift those over to the right by 2, and I will remember to add those into the scene. And now we have a circle with a set of axes on the right. So now I want to start drawing the things that I'm going to animate. So for this, I'm going to use something called a value tracker. So this isn't something that will be shown on the screen, but this is something that can control the values that I'm passing into the things that I'm moving around. So it's going to start at 0, and I'm going to tell it to move from 0 up to 2 pi. So to do that, I add this self.play function, and this is where the animation starts. So I tell it alpha animate set value 2 times pi, so that will then increase the value of alpha from 0 to 2 times pi. I'm going to give it a runtime of 10 seconds, if that seems a reasonable length for this animation. And this rate function equals linear tells it to move at a steady constant rate. There are all sorts of different rate functions that you can use. By default, it starts off slowly and speeds up and then slows down again. But I think for this particular animation, a linear one is probably better. So if I run that, we won't actually see anything. So it's created a video now instead of a still picture. You can see it's 10 seconds long, but it doesn't actually do anything now because we haven't told it to do anything. All we're doing is increasing this number of alpha. So let's tell it to actually do something now. Let's create a point on the circle. So for the point on the circle, I'm using this always redraw function. So every time that alpha changes, it will redraw the circle that I define in here. So always redraw, it expects a function to be passed into it. Lambda seems to be the default name for these functions that you pass into other functions. I'm a bit unclear on why that is or how they work, but that's what I'll do. So this lambda creates another dot. I shift it to the left by 2, so that puts it on the radius of the circle, because the centre is shifted left by 3 and it's a circle of radius 1. And then I want to rotate it around that circle. So this rotate function, you first of all pass in an angle. That will be the value of alpha, which is going from 0 to 2 pi. And then you pass in the point that you want it to move around. So in that case, this is the centre, and this get centre function will get the coordinates of the centre of the centre point that we defined to start with. So if I add that point circle to the scene, then when I run it, we should see a point moving around the circle. Okay, so let's add the sine graph next. So again, I'm going to use this always redraw function, which works in the same way. On the axis that I defined earlier, I'm going to do a plot. The sine plot is already defined, so I can just use that there. I've given it a colour. I can't even remember why I gave it a colour, but that's something you can pass in. Everything in Manim is really customizable. You can change the colour and lots of things about how it looks. And I'm going to give it a range, so I want my sine curve to go from 0 to whatever the value of alpha is at this particular moment. I'm going to put that up in steps of 0.1, but I don't think that makes a big difference for our purposes at the moment. So I will add that to the scene. And we have a sine graph that's increasing in line with how the circle is moving, how the point is moving around the circle. So I don't think there's a lot more to add now. It might be nice to have a point on the end of that sine graph so that we can see the points moving in tandem with each other, and then maybe link them up with a line. So I'll add both of those at the same time. So we have a point on the sine graph, so following the same idea as the previous point. So this time the centre of our point, we can use this function axes coords to point, so that will plot a point on our axes and it will convert it to a point that Manim can understand. So we want the x value of that to be whatever the value of alpha is. So alpha.getValue, and we want the y value to be the y coordinate of wherever the point is on the circle. So we go to this point circle, we use this function to get its centre. That returns a list with 3 values, x, y and z, so we want the second one of those. They're 0 index, so 0 is x, 1 is y and 2 is z. So we get value 1, which would be the y coordinate. And then we can draw a line, which again uses this always redraw function, and it's simply a line from the point on the circle, we'll get the centre of that, to the point on the sine graph, we'll get the centre of that. So I'll add both these things into my scene. And that should complete the animation. So there are all sorts of ways that I could customize this. I might change that line into a dashed line. I might change the colors. I might put a radius on the circle and show the angle here. I could put some labels on the axis. All of these things would probably be great. But I think for the purposes of getting started with doing something like this in Manim, this is probably enough to be going on with. As I said, I will put the link to the Manim documentation in the video description, and if any Manim experts out there want to tell me how to do any of this better, I would love to hear it.